In case you don't know, my name is Dov Barron. I'm the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. And I write for Entrepreneur Magazine, for Medium, for Thrive, which is the new Ariana Huffington outlet, Entrepreneur Magazine, and about 10 other outlets. So it's always cool for you to find me in all kinds of different places. Of course, you can find me on Twitter at the Dov Barron, on LinkedIn just by my name, DOVBARON, and in all kinds of other places. So just search me out, you'll find me. I am a leadership speaker, I am a leadership consultant, mentor, work with individuals, companies, organizations in helping them to become purpose-driven, to create transformative leadership, and really transformational leadership that really brings us back to the sort of sole purpose of our organizations. Tony's just joined us from Colorado. So we've got Colorado, we've got Canada, we've got the US, we've got Portugal, we've got people all over the place joining us, and it's really good to have you on. And please share the show with everybody you know. We really appreciate it. Let's jump in. I'm not going to wait around. Let's just jump right in. Okay? So today's show, control. When to give it up, when to claim it, and when to give it away. It's interesting how much control matters to us. We try to have our lives be in control in some way, shape, or form. And there's an interesting thing about it, that whether you are a complete control freak, and I say that somewhat with my tongue in cheek, what I mean by that is that aren't we all? And what I mean by that is, even the most relaxed person, the easiest going person you know, is likely to be a bit of a control freak about something. You know, they're very relaxed about certain things, but other things we have a lot of need to control things. But what is that about? Why do we need to control things? What is it that drives us to want to control? Now, at a basic level, it is a survival mechanism, and it allows us to see the predictability of things. It allows us to recognize certain patterns and say, this is a preferable pattern to me. I like this pattern better, this pattern of behavior, this pattern of things that are going on in the world, all those kinds of things. It allows us to do those kinds of things and gives us a level or sense of safety. Yes, including controlling your bladder, as Lisa just pointed out. So we need control, we want control, but it doesn't always work. So let's just take a look at control for a minute from a different place. What can you control? Now, I know you all, my audience are very smart people, and I'm glad that you are. And I ask you, what can you control? And you all know the right answer. There's nothing you can control, except for yourself, your own attitude. But can you be active in that process, or is it passive? And I want to give you some insights into that, if I may. So the first place I wanted to start with this is here. We, human beings, love to make up stories. We make up stories about all kinds of things. And I don't know if you notice that about yourself, that you make shit up. And so somebody looks at you a bit sideways and you make up a story about that. You say, oh, that person doesn't like me, or, you know, they were offended by something, or they really like me. You make up things, you make up stories based on your own filters, whatever you've got in your head. And you're going to make those stories up based on those filters in your head because they're going to back up whatever it is that you believe. So the stories that are firing off in your head are in alignment with whatever you believe. And in fact, that is a process of control. What do I mean? It means that you're trying to predict the world, your environment, other people, via your stories. You see, you're allowing that by making up those stories and controlling those stories, you get to say how the world is. This is how the world is based on the stories that are going off in your head. The problem with that is that those stories may be entirely false. Now, what I mean by entirely false is this, that the stories you have in your head were true. There's no doubt about it. If you've got a story in your head, at some point in time, in some point in your history, in some point in your reality, it was a truth. but it may not be a truth anymore, except through the process of you trying to control your environment. So what happens is you project your reality, you project what you see as the truth onto a situation and then start to believe it that way. And that gives you a sense of control of the environment, control of other people, control of a situation that may in fact be quite false from what is the actual truth rather than the perceived truth based on your stories. But can you, so all that's going on pretty much at a subconscious level, unless you become aware of it. So the question becomes, can you become active in this process? And the answer is, of course, yes. You become very active in the process. So I want to give you an example. I want you to imagine, because I was having this conversation with somebody today, I want you to imagine for a moment that you're on the road, which personally, for me, is the place I like to be least patient. I will fully own that. So I want you to imagine that you're on the road and somebody is, you can see this person in your rear view mirror. You can see them coming up pretty fast, and they seem to be bobbing and weaving and going between the lanes and whipping in and out of traffic. And at that point, it's easy to say, this person is crazy. They're driving like a lunatic. They're nuts. Very easy to say those kinds of things about that person to make up that story about who they are so that you can justify being upset. Now, that's fine. That's all whatever it is. But you have, by virtue of that judgment, you have made up a story about that person. You've made up a story about who they are and about what's really going on in their life and about what matters to them and about what doesn't matter to them. You've already decided, based on the story you're making up in your head, you are already trying to control the outcome. So what would happen if instead you understood that you have no control? This person is bobbing and weaving and jutting in and out of traffic and maybe tailgating you and doing all those things that you previously judged as crazy. And what would happen if you suddenly stopped and said, hold on, what if there's another story? What if the story is, in fact, that they are racing to get to the hospital because there's a sick kid in that car? What if they're racing to get to the hospital because their kid was taken to the hospital or somebody they love was taken to the hospital and they're trying to get to that hospital to see that person? What if that person is racing up behind you and tailgating behind you because they have an ass of a boss who is likely to fire them if they're 1 minute, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, whatever it is, late? What if there's a multitude of choices about why they might be doing what it is? What does this do? Well, first of all, it allows you to settle in a little bit and have more compassion. It allows you to have more compassion, not only for them, but also for yourself. It allows you to stop and look at what it is that you're trying to control and where you feel out of control. So now I want to go on to the next part of this. Control. Why do we want it? It gives us a sense of safety. But here's the thing about control. You will never have it. Not in 100% way. You will never actually have control until you do one thing. There's one thing you can do to fully have control. I wonder if you know what it is. The answer is, you will never have control until you give it away. Until you give up control, you'll never actually have it. As long as you are fighting control, as long as you are holding on to control, as long as you are trying to control everyone and everything around you, you will feel out of control. Now, here's the question. Really worth thinking about for a moment. And it's this. I want you to think about, in your own life, where you are a bit of a control freak. Now, control shows up in many ways, and one of the clearest ways it shows up is in judgment. Now, we've talked about judgment many times before, and I've said you can't not judge. That's part of what we do as human beings in order to survive. But where you find yourself judging all the time, not discerning, which is a completely different thing. But judging, where do you find yourself judging? Well, you're judging their behavior, you're judging the way they should be, you're judging, and all that judgment is going on. What that actually is saying is, you're trying to control them. Now, why would you do that? And the answer is simple. You would try and do that because you're actually out of control in your own life. So the more we feel out of control, even if we're not going to admit it either to ourselves or others, the more we feel, excuse me, the more we feel out of control in our own lives, the more we're likely to want to control other people's lives. I was working with a leader recently who he's in a primary relationship, and for all intents and purposes, it looks like a very nice, loving relationship. And I happen to know some of the other, like I also work with some of his friends who were talking about how he's been very different lately, and how he is very judgmental, and he's very critical, and he's correcting people on how they should be, and how the way they are is not the way they should be if they're a leader, or if they're enlightened, or if they're whatever the hell it is that he's judging them on. And these people are like, you know, it seems so out of character. I don't understand why he's being that way. It's so strange. But if you observe him with his relationship partner, you can see how much of his life is controlled by her. Now, is she controlling him because she's a horrible person? No. She's controlling him because that's what we do in order to feel safe. So she doesn't feel safe for her own reasons, and because she's not feeling safe, she's not in control of herself, she will have to control something external of herself, which happens to be him. As a result, he doesn't feel in control, so he's now controlling everybody around him. The more you need to control others, the less you have control in your own life. That is how it works. That's what we feel like we have to do. We are looking for that balance. That part of us that feels out of control wants to feel in control. So if I'm out of control over here, then I've got to control over here. And we're looking for that, how to sort of move the teeter-totter. And if it's too far down on one side, then we want to shift it to the other side and make sure that it's always balanced out some way. And if we don't learn how to do that in a healthy way, then we're going to do it in a very unhealthy way. We're going to find a way to control others rather than controlling ourselves. Does this make sense, everybody? I really hope it does. So how do you get over this? What are the tips? What are the clues? First of all, when you want to control somebody, the first place you have to look, when you want to control a situation, the first place you have to look is, where might you feel out of control? You go, I'm fine, I'm good, whatever, I'm absolutely fine. Stop and ask yourself, okay, but where might I feel out of control? Maybe you feel out of control with your weight. Maybe you feel out of control with your health. Maybe you feel out of control with your eating. Maybe you feel out of control with you can't stop swearing. I mean, I'm making stuff up here, whatever it is for you. This is really important for you to look at where you feel out of control. Do you feel out of control in your compulsion in a relationship? Do you feel out of control in your sex life? Do you feel out of control? You know, there are all kinds of things you could feel out of control of that are not obvious to the world. You see, and this is part of the problem, is we live in a time that has two faces. And what I mean by that is, there is the personal, intimate face, and then there is the public face. And it's one of the things I warn people about all the time, that the person you have on Facebook is not the person, it's one face of a person. People don't, share their everyday grind with you on Facebook, and if they do, you probably stop listening or stop watching or stop reading any of their stuff. So we tend to present a single facet of who we are, but that's not who we are. And so if we feel like we're massively out of control in one area, but we're supposed to keep up this facade, then things start to change. So we really need to look at where we feel out of control. And instead of looking at everybody else, instead of looking at how we can control everybody else, or how we can try to control a situation, or getting really judgmental about a situation, take the time to be honest with yourself. And one of the things, you know, anybody who's been around me for any period of time knows, anybody I've worked with, and I see that many of you are on here, which is so cool, thank you very much for being here, is all of you know that I encourage deeply that you journal. Pick up your journal, take a look and put your thoughts in your journal. And if you don't know the answers, always start with what if, maybe, what might. So they don't have to be absolutes. It's not like, oh yeah, I'm out of control with this. There are going to be things that you might feel obviously out of control with, but there's going to be many things that you don't feel until you start writing it down. And one of the ways to do that is to flip it around again and say, okay, where am I being judgmental with others? How am I judging other people? Because that judgment is an attempt to control somebody else or somebody else's behavior. When you look at how you're trying to control somebody else or somebody else's behavior, that's a clue for you. That's a real clue for you. When you want to jump in that conversation that's all about judging the shit out of somebody, that's a clue for you that something in your life feels out of control, and the compensation is to try and control another. So how does that work? Well, I want to take it to the next level for you and have you grasp it. It's something I've spoken about before, which is reality TV. You see, if we look at everybody else and we judge them, and we look at their behaviors and we look at how they are, and they seem far worse than us, then we can say, well, see, I'm not so screwed up. I'm okay. Yeah, I got kind of messy and there were some things going on, but it's not as bad as them. So by judging another person, it makes it very easy to let yourself off the hook. It makes it very easy for you to not look at yourself. It makes it very easy for you to let your own shit go down the toilet without really paying attention to what's actually going on. You want to transform your life, just take a step back. Now again, I'm going to say this. We all judge. I'm not asking you not to judge. You can't help but judge. That's part of what we do. It's part of the human condition. It's a survival mechanism. But the distinction is between judgment and discernment. Judgment is about them. You're trying to control them. You're judging in your head how they should be. Discernment is about how it impacts you. Be discerning, by all means. Decide what works for you, what's good for you, and let everybody be whoever they are, whatever they are. It's going to make your life a lot easier, going to make you a lot more comfortable in your own skin, and going to allow you to be just a little more honest about what it is that you need to look at. So to reiterate, let's go back a little bit, step back and review. We all judge. It's a foregone conclusion. But when you find yourself judging on a regular basis, when you find yourself hyper-vigilant around your judging, that's a clue for you, no matter what area it's in. Even if you feel like you're a very non-judgmental person, take a look at where you might be judging another, because that's probably something you need to look at in yourself. I can tell you that I can remember years ago talking to people when I was in my, I was in my early 20s. And when I think back to who I was in my early 20s, there are certain things that I carry a good deal of healthy shame about. What I mean by healthy shame is something I want. I want that shame. It works as a deterrent for me. I don't like the way it feels. And back in my early 20s, when somebody would pass me whose body was in some way, by my bullshit judgment, less than how I thought it should be, I was very harsh about it. Very harsh about it. I remember criticizing girlfriends' bodies. Like, what an asshole. I was so bad about that. Because, you know, I was fit, I was healthy, I was going to the gym, I was doing all those things. But the truth of the matter is, I had to examine that deeper. And I did, as I got a little bit older, towards my end of my 20s. I started to look at it going, how do I really feel about my body? How do I actually feel about my body? And you know what I revealed? It was I hated it. I was extremely judgmental of my own body. And the original reason for me doing a lot of the health and fitness things that I was doing was actually not out of love, which it is now, and respect for my body, but rather, back in those days, it was out of judgment, out of hating my body, about it feeling not good enough. That was actually what was driving my fitness. And so, of course, I was extremely judgmental of others. I was extremely judgmental of other people and how their bodies were, because I would project my judgment onto them. The desire to control others is simply a statement of how you feel out of control in yourself. So take a look, take a step back, and consider that control, the desire to control, to judge another, is simply where you feel out of control with yourself. If you're noticing yourself being judgmental and controlling of other people, be honest with yourself and take a look at where you feel out of control. It will really change absolutely everything you do. So, with that, I'm not going to quite sign off yet. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll sign off, but I'll come back. What I mean by that is, I'll just say who I am, and then I'm going to come back. So, again, if you've gotten lots out of this, my name is Dov Barron, fullmontyleadership.com. You can find me on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn. You can find me on YouTube. You can find me on iTunes. Dov Barron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. However, I want to stay on for a minute or two, and I'm going to look at what your responses are and see if you have any questions for me, because I'm happy to stay on and answer your questions on this lovely spring day here in Vancouver. So let's have a look. All right. Oh, there's lots of great stuff here. Good to see. Oh, and so many of you coming in from all kinds of great places. Thank you. Wow. Oh, my goodness. All right. Toronto, Colorado, Portugal, New Zealand, Australia, the UK, several UKers. Hey, Carl, good to see you on here. Lisa, as I said, from Tuscany. Lynn, let's see what Lynn says. Lynn says, you described my daily commute and what I try to do. I fail a lot, but I try to think that person can't be careless. They must have an excuse. Yeah, again, so not even an excuse, because I don't want to sort of let people off the hook, but like, consider that people have a reason for doing everything. Everybody has a reason. So here's the thing, I want to just help everybody with a little tip here. And the tip is this, that when you think about it, we look at people and we judge them, and we judge them by their behavior. And that's not fair. That's not unfair. That's a reasonable way to judge somebody and say who they are, is that their behavior is a certain way. But at the same time, when we screw up, we apologize and say, what do we say? That wasn't my intention. So we judge others by their behavior, and we judge ourselves by our intention. So maybe one of the tricks is to flip that around and start judging ourselves a little bit more by our behavior. It might bring yourself back to a center place, okay, rather than with others. All right, let's have a look here. What about somebody who doesn't respect a boundary, Steve said. Well, not respecting a boundary, I don't know that that's the same question. Happy to answer that in the context of boundary, but you would have to give me how that is about control. Again, we're looking at the difference between judgment and discernment. Judgment is about them. Discernment is about you. Do you need a boundary for yourself? Absolutely you do. You need to have boundaries for yourself. And you need to hold those boundaries. If people don't respect them, it's very simple. Remove them from your life. Scott says, how do you approach someone who is deeply narcissistic and living in their own world? That's easy. You don't. So again, you can't control anybody. So part of the thing, part of the challenge that I see with so many people is this, is that we want to control people, but one of the key factors in helping you get healthier around these kinds of things is simply this. We all have to take a look at who people are and decide, is this somebody I want in my life? You know, some of us have narcissistic children. Some of us have narcissistic siblings. Some of us have narcissistic, hedonistic, totally sociopathic parents. And we're under this crazy idea that you have to love somebody because they're in your family. That is just not true. Some of the most unhealthy people are probably in your family. And if you're going to have healthy boundaries, you need to have discernment around whether you're going to have them in your life. That is just what's healthy. And if you have to have this person in your life, then you go, okay, well, the narcissistic person is my boss, and I don't have a choice. I've got to have that person in my life. Okay, well, that's actually not true, because you could leave. You could go somewhere else. You could decide to move on and do something else. Even if you're inside of a larger institution, you could apply for a different position, or you could simply leave the organization. Those are always options. You're not ever stuck. You're not stuck in a single place and going, this is just the way it is. It's not. But what we have to do is we have to see people for the way they are and go, okay, that's who they are. And what this is something I learned many years ago from one of my teachers, is you've got to have radical acceptance or radical rejection. And there are some people in my life that I genuinely love. I do. I have love for them. But I just cannot have them in my life because they're just too damn toxic. For me, if that's how they want to live, that is rock and roll, that's fabulous. I don't actually have a problem with it, and I actually wish them absolutely well, but I can't have them in my life. There are people I've had in my life and they've repeatedly broke my trust, and I go, okay, I just can't have them in my life. It doesn't mean they're bad people. It just means that it doesn't work for me, and that's okay. But I can't control whether they change their behavior. I can't control whether they are a certain way or not. I don't have that kind of control. I don't have that kind of power, and neither do you. So that's my message for you today. I hope that you found this valuable. I hope that you found it insightful, and I do hope that you will share this show, even if you're watching it as an encore. Share the show with everybody you know. Please, the more you share it, the more you get the wealth out there, the better it helps everybody else, and we all got to share the wealth. So please get it out there. Share the show with everybody you know. Leave me your comments, leave me your feedback. Always appreciate it. Whether you're watching this on one of the group channels or whether you're watching this on one of my pages, please share the show with everybody you know. I appreciate you being on. I really do. And until next time, this is Dov Baron saying, stay curious, my friends. Stay curious about what you need to look at, about what you need to control, and how you're trying to control others. Till next time, this is Dov Baron, and I am out.